This is the Atari 8-bit podcast.
A rumor got out that we were going to search people as they left the floor, as they left shift. Later that evening, as we went into the lavatories, the floors were littered with cartridges and PC boards that are fully functional. And this was, planned in advance until the landfill opened up a brand new cut, a brand new area, so that we could be on the very, very bottom. If I had an auditor come in, I'd sit him down at an Atari game console on either the console or my computer and have him play some games. Boy, that audit went sweet after that.
I'm Kevin Savitz, and this is an interview episode of Antic, the Atari 8-bit podcast. Alan Stratton was Atari's plant controller, manufacturing the financial functions in the El Paso, Texas manufacturing facility. He was also involved with the infamous dumping of game cartridges in the Alamogordo, New Mexico dump. This interview took place October 2nd, 2015. Where are you? It's beautiful back there.
I'm in Portland, Oregon.
Oh, as am I.
Oh, you are? Okay.
What part of town are you in?
I'm in Tigard on Bull Mountain.
Oh, okay. I'm in Southwest Portland.
Okay.
It's hilarious.
All this we thought were worlds apart.
Yeah. Right, yeah. Nice. I have interviewed many people who worked in various aspects of Atari, and I understand you were plant controller in El Paso, Texas.
That's correct.
I would like to know all about that. Tell me, I do. I want to know all about it. So tell me, how'd you get hired by Atari? Tell me the backstory, the story before the story.
The story before the story. Well, I was looking for a job to upgrade my employment. Mm-hmm. Had been working for General Instrument in El Paso. And one of my cost accounting guys quit and went to Atari. And then they had some unfortunate occurrences with the previous controller, and he left abruptly. And then my cost guy recommended me for the job. Mm-hmm. So that's how I got the controllership there at Atari. I rated as a startup because the plant when I came on was, 100 to 200 people, and very, very quickly we got up to 800 employees at the plant. And we went to a brand new building up closer to my home, and it was a wild ride. Just as one comparison that I find interesting, that I did about 3 months after I got with Atari, is I said, okay, now the division of General Instrument that I had been working for struggled to make $70 or $80 million worth of sales, that's revenue, mm-hmm. in a year. And I said, okay, now with the new plant and with the production lines going full tilt, we're making 40 million cartridges a month. And now, even as a controller, they didn't release financial information to me, but I knew the cost structure and such of the cartridge. And I said, okay, yeah, they're selling for $30, $40. Let's give a retail margin. Here's the cost. Let's just assume that we make $2 a cartridge. Mm-hmm. So I said $2 times 40 million. That's $80 million profit a month compared to $70 million revenue a year.
Wow.
I said, I like this job.
Yeah. Yeah, and I've seen papers since then, and I don't know if what year this was from, but the cost to manufacture a cartridge and the box and the manual and a big thick manual was about $4 or $5.
That's probably in the ballpark. Yeah.
Yeah.
The semiconductor was half that, and then everything else was the rest. But yes, yeah. It was a wild ride.
So, what is a plant controller? What was your job?
Manage all the financial functions there for the El Paso facility. So we had accounts payable, we had the cost accounting, we had the payroll, and and the works on that regard. Later on, when we took over the customer returns, I have to add another like 15 people just to account for the returns paperwork processing.
Wow.
So at the peak, my staff was like 27 people.
And you were just managing the El Paso manufacturing facility.
Only this El Paso manufacturing.
Okay. All right.
But we also had contractors, subcontractors over in Juarez, Mexico, that we got controllers and other accessories from. So that was part of our operation also.
So you were manufacturing cartridges mostly, or also hardware? What were you guys churning out?
We went through various phases. At the beginning, it was primarily cartridges, and then most of the cartridges went to Puerto Rico because of the tax haven in Puerto Rico, and we scaled back, and then we had to lay off a lot of people. Then they said, hey, well, let's have custom returns go into El Paso, and so we staffed up, and we were in effect receiving and deprocessing cartridges. And then near the end, we were assembling Atari 5200 consoles and 2600 consoles in addition to the cartridges. So yeah, different phases at different times.
Nice.
And
So-
at the very end, they were planning to move the console operation and make part of the plant dedicated to the stand-up game consoles,
The arcade games.
arcade games.
All right. So what? So on a day-to-day basis, I mean, was your head in books, doing accounting stuff? Were you on ledgers? Were you using Atari 800s to do your work? What? How was?
Well, that was the phase in terms of computing that was also very interesting because my first personal computer was an Atari 800 computer that I inherited when I took over the job. And it was a new experience for me to have an Atari 800 computer with VisiCalc. And since I worked for Atari, I loaded it up. I had 4 disk drives and a serial interface and a 25-inch color TV as a monitor. And if I was very, very careful in my boot up sequence, I could get 21K of memory available for me, to do VisiCalc.
Nice.
Well, it was mostly the accounting work. When we got accounts payable and started paying checks, we had to receive all the and pay for all the semiconductors, and that was kind of a milestone for me when I signed my first $1 million check for the semiconductors, which was kind of wild and woolly. But it was interesting to go out on the floor and watch cartridges going together. I like to see stuff going together. So.
Nice.
But that, and I did do some programming on the Atari. I wrote a database manager for the Atari, and we used that to process custom returns and take inventory and a few things like that.
Oh, nice. And this is just something for internal use?
Yes, it never got beyond internal use. It was still pretty rough, but there was no database utility for the Atari at the time. So
Nice.
it worked. It wouldn't pass today's standards at all.
So what year did you get hired?
Let's see. It would have been 1981, I believe.
And you worked there for how long?
Till the bitter end, 1984, I believe it was.
84. July 84, I guess.
Yes, that was a wild experience when I got the call Sunday morning from my boss, Erwin Lenowitz in Sunnyvale. And he said, "Hey, Atari's been sold." And I said, "Yes," because we'd been hoping for a sale. Warner Communications wasn't doing us any favors. And I said, "Okay," and he says, "Yeah, shut down, take inventory." Okay, well, fine. So, it's kind of a shock. So we spent the next 2 days just getting ready to take inventory. Wednesday that week was the 4th of July, and so we had that off. And Wednesday, we heard over the radio, yes, Atari had been sold, but the El Paso plant was not included in the sale and would be shut down. So that was our first word that the El Paso plant was history.
Wow.
It's over the radio rather than through any kind of official channels. And normally a physical inventory would take us 2 days, and that one took us 3 weeks.
Well, just because you had to do everything, or because you were not in a hurry to not lose your job?
Well, by rights, we weren't ready, and nobody was motivated.
Right.
And we had 2 teams of auditors that were being very, very picky. So, multitude of factors, but motivation was one of them in the end. Why work to, because earlier when ET was being produced, we didn't shut down for physical inventory. We produced right through it, which was unusual and unheard of in accounting circles. To get enough ET out to stock the store shelves before Christmas. And of course, you know the story of ET, what a dog that was.
Sure.
Yeah. That was rushed through design and production and in record time just to make Christmas, and it was a dog.
So so you guys were manufacturing ET. Was there any sense ahead of time that they've ordered too many, or that this game is not ready for prime time before it was too late? Was there any? Did you guys know that?
No,
it was coming.
We didn't have a clue. Nobody could play it. And then the hype was, well, Atari could do no wrong at that time, and everything we touched was gold and would sell. And ET just didn't measure up to anybody's standards.
Right. All right. So tell me about before. We've already jumped to the end. So before the end, and your 3 years there, tell me about the day to day. Tell me a story. Tell me about the workplace. Tell me about the people.
Well, the day to day was very interesting. I mean, we had the lines going full tilt out on the floor. You could walk through and see people putting the chip on the board and putting the shield over the chip, and then it go through the flow solder, and then on the other end, it'd be put together in the plastic cartridge, and then we had automatic insertion gear so that it would be inserted into the box, the packaging is under the box, and then it was interesting to watch the hot melt glue squirt out, and then occasionally a air jet would blow one off the assembly line because it was too light, something got missed. And so we'd just pop it off and box them up and get pallets and pallets and pallets of them. But here's a story for you. One time, a rumor got out that we were going to search people as they left the floor, as they left shift.
Looking for lossage?
Looking for shrinkage.
Shrinkage, that's the word.
That's the official word, was shrinkage. Right. And we didn't, but still, when later that evening, as we went into the lavatories, the floors were littered with cartridges and PC boards that are fully functional. And because if you wore cowboy boots, which were in fashion in El Paso, you could fit 3 cartridges in the side of one boot, or if you took just the board and the chip, you could probably fit a good half dozen of them in one cowboy boot as well as your foot. So yes, we had tremendous shrinkage. Wow. It was crazy, but it was fun.
You think was your sense that people were selling that stuff on the side, or were they just taking them home to their kids to play a game?
Oh, friends and relatives probably more than anything. My predecessor had been fired for getting remanufactured consoles and selling them into Mexico, and diverting them. So that's kind of the story there, and created a reputation that was hard to live down.
Yeah, I bet. It seems like there would be a company that size and with that many people, there would just be a lot of opportunity for people to do creative things that
Yes, I'm sure. I mean, but then but it was fun. But maybe just another thing in term related to shrinkage that maybe would be interesting is that when we started processing customer returns, we would get mountains of material back, and some would be cartridges and some would be consoles. And the idea was the customer would return it, but it had to be a new return. Like, it was initially dead or whatever. It was supposed to be the reason for the return. But part of our criteria in receiving these things in was to look at the bezel and the switches, and we would get game consoles back with the switches, the switch covers being totally black, and the painted bezels being totally worn off. And those were supposed to be new machines being returned for credit, and it just didn't happen. And then we accumulated these mountains and mountains of cartridges and consoles, and we just didn't know what to do with them. And so we explored recycling, taking things apart and recycling, recycle the plastic for plastic, and try and get the gold out of the chip. And so we tried taking them apart, but that wasn't cost effective because they weren't new, and we made so much more on new ones that it didn't make sense to sell used cartridges. We even took some down and took the plastic off and sent the chip to a crusher to be crushed and then smelted down for gold. But even with that, it seemed like a lot of them leaked out into the public and work to do that. So we accumulated these cartridges. And so that's when we got to the point where the Alamogordo landfill story comes in, which was a wild experience. We knew we had to, if we were going to put them in the landfill, that it had to be a brand new cut. They had to be really, really deep. And so we waited, and this was planned in advance, until the landfill opened up a brand new cut, a brand new area, so that we could be on the very, very bottom. And we signed off on all the paperwork for that, and then 20 truckloads up to dump cartridges primarily, but some game consoles in there, and to dump them in there. And then, of course, it hit the national news that Atari was dumping game cartridges in Alamogordo and in the desert, and people started showing up with shovels. And my boss happened to be out of town that week, and I was acting plant manager that week as well as controller. So materials guy came in with a requisition, say, hey, they're starting to dig up the cartridges. The only thing we can do is to order up concrete. So the requisition then was for several truckloads of concrete to go up and pour the concrete over the material that we had dumped, all the cartridges and the consoles and whatever that we had dumped. And then to add insult to injury, we had to pay a dump fee for the concrete.
Wow.
And then, of course, that hit the news, a year or so ago, of people saying, Atari had dumped these, and it was some expedition to try and find these cartridges. Well, we knew exactly where they were.
Right. There was that, they did a documentary about it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it was even in my daughter's computer science textbook 15 years ago.
So, yeah, it was all customer returns, right? It was
all customer returns.
Right.
And yes, probably 85 to 90% of the cartridges were probably functionally okay.
Yeah.
They would work.
They just were bad games.
Bad games or returns or what have you, and they work. I guess they're finding them and they still work. So you probably know more about that than I do at this point. I haven't kept track.
Yeah, they found a bunch of them and for the documentary, and then the city of Alamogordo sold a bunch of them off and made a bunch of money, and some of them still work.
Oh yeah, well, there's probably a lot more down there where those came from.
Right.
But, they've got to mine them gradually and try and make a little bit of the money that we made back then. But
right.
E.T. was the beginning of the end, I think, of Atari. because we were spending money, we were making money hand over fist, and it was like a big parabola where you're going up and up and up and up, and then you just start imploding from your own weight.
Right.
Because that last year was pretty wild because one quarter, I don't remember the exact numbers, but uh, we were losing so much money that Warner Communications had to report Atari separately from the rest of their operations, just for political reasons.
Mm-hmm.
And so we lost like $250 million in one quarter.
Jeez.
That used to be big money.
Yeah, yeah.
And then the next quarter, we did even better. We lost $750 million. So you're talking about $1 billion, and then we improved it the next quarter to, I think, half a billion dollars, and then the next quarter they sold us, and actually the sale was more of a giveaway, and what Warner got Communications got in return, as I understand it, were a bunch of warrants, and the new company put in $80 million to try and as working capital, but they were supposed to take over debts, but I think they defaulted on most of them.
Yeah.
I didn't think much of the new owners.
So as the guy who's writing out the big checks for things, could you see when you were there, in the moment, could you see that things had spun out of control?
Well, the first phase, it just seemed more normal because that was when Atari, the cartridges, a lot of the production went over to Puerto Rico. And that was okay. Well, that was a decision, and then later than that was the ET, but we were still making some cartridges. And then after things started coming back from ET, then of course there's other games that Atari put out, but they just didn't seem to have the same pizzazz.
Mm-hmm.
And I really don't think that the sales growth dropped that much. It stopped growing so incredibly fast. And so the revenue may have dropped down to increasing like to 10% per year, as opposed to 200%, 300% year over year increase beforehand. And then we were spending like we were before, and it just didn't work anymore.
Yeah.
And so we were actually in El Paso in pretty good shape because okay, well, we're going to move the arcade game section in, and so we were actually planning things out. Had vacated a section of the plant. We're looking at tearing up concrete to put those machines in and get ready for that. It was actually going to be a brand new opportunity. Although we did think that Warner, at least personally, I thought that Warner Communications was not doing us any favors, and so that's when the sale came. I thought, hey, we've got to be bought by somebody better than Warner Communications. This will breathe new life into us. But no.
So were you there when they shut off the lights at the end?
I was probably the second to last employee to leave. I had to. They gave me a stay bonus, which was very attractive. If you stay 3 months, you have 50% of your pay as a bonus. Mm-hmm. And so I was motivated to stay those 3 months. And I had to get a lot of Mexican customs returns done in that period of time. There's not much else. And then try and negotiate with the new owners on paying off some of the payables that they were supposed to take on. But they didn't. So I was second to last. The last guy out was the plant manager who was going to retire, and he was the one that shut off the lights.
Wow. And where did you go from there?
Went from there to National Semiconductor in Arlington, Texas, and I did. It was good for me because in that 3 months I did find a new job, and so I walked out of Atari on Friday and into National Semiconductor on Monday. That was good.
Nice. So what haven't I asked you that I should have?
Let's see. You got the Alamogordo. You got that story. Um, it was just a real. I rate it as being a very fun experience. It gave me a leg up, an opportunity. I got the controller title, which helped me get the job with National Semiconductor. So personally, it was rewarding.
Mm-hmm.
I had some good people to work with. Um, and so I rate it as being a good experience. Bonuses were great when they were in the first 2 years, uh, and nothing after that. But it was a great experience and good people. And maybe one other story is that I had previous to Atari, I'd worked for General Instruments in a particular division that was about half a mile from the Atari facility. And yeah, that the environment, working environment, I left because the working environment had gone really, really south. And so when we shut down, I had three people interview with General Instrument from my staff. And they came to me and said, "Hey, we're looking at General Instrument, and we know you worked there before. Would you recommend that we take this job or go somewhere else?" I said, "Well, the problem was that the environment was the plant manager when I left was a real piece of work.
Mm-hmm.
The personnel manager was a real piece of work, and the controller was a real piece of work. Uh, since then, they had changed each one of those positions, so maybe uh, maybe it'd be okay. So at least two of them went over there when Atari shut down, and it's my understanding that they left after 6 months because the environment hadn't changed. But, yeah, yeah. Atari itself was a great experience.
Good. Awesome.
Let's
If
see
you
what else. The accounting stuff probably is not very interesting to anybody else, but
Why was it interesting to you? I mean,
well, it's what I did, and to keep things interesting, I did do some programming to write the database manager for the information. Oh, we did have uh, game contests after work. So we had by the end several, Atari, and then we did have some IBM PCs, which were fairly new at the time. And there was a game at the end that's called Crossfire. It wasn't an Atari game, but we had tournaments after work for Crossfire. Uh, and even the plant manager had an Atari game console in his office. And and I remember one of them actually got addicted to Pac-Man, and had to actually pull himself away from Pac-Man so that he didn't play it on the job and play it too much. Okay, well, here's one interesting tidbit. Every so often in the accounting function, you have auditors come in from corporate and whatever.
mm-hmm.
And if I had an auditor come in, I'd sit him down at an Atari game console on either the console or my computer and have him play some games. And boy, that audit went sweet after that. The scope just got crammed down into the bare minimum that they had to do, and it was a great audit facilitator. I'm not saying that we had anything to hide. It just meant things went very smoothly, and they did what they had to and did no more than that, and life went on, and life was sweet.
Nice. I interviewed a guy who worked at that plant. He was the materials planner. His name's Joe Villalobos. Did you know him?
Oh, Joe
Villalobos.
Villalobos. I don't recall the name. It's been a long time.
Sure.
Yeah.
Just the only other name I know from that facility, so I thought I'd ask.
Yeah, well, there were several bosses for the material manager at the time. I'm struggling to recall their names at this point, but yeah, my staff. Let's see. I had Tony Gonzalez, who was my cost guy. Oh boy, I'm not remembering names now. So it's been quite a while.
Sure. If you could send a message to the people who played your games back then and
those who are listening to the podcast who still are playing the games that you helped create, what would you tell them?
Oh boy. Enjoy. I mean, gaming is just good fun, and as long as it's kept in in moderation, it's a great experience to enhance your eye-hand coordination and your thought processing, and I enjoyed it, and I think games are great and prepare you for more computer skills and that are absolutely required now. We were right then in the transition from being very, very manual to having a PC. A personal computer was a brand new experience, and people didn't believe that I had a computer on my desk that I could have it do what I wanted it to do, and it wasn't the IT function that was doing it for me and on big machine and what have you. So it would do what I wanted. VisiCalc and a spreadsheet was a brand new experience, and I think today people take those for granted. Everybody is running Excel and thinks they're an Excel wizard, and it was a brave new world then. We actually were doing the budgets for the plant there, and budgets are generally a boring subject to most people, but corporate would have us fill out a lot of paper forms for the budget, one for each department, and fill it out. And we were trying to model it up, and we were using a timeshare service. And 200 baud was fantastic as far as our connect rate. And we were spending $3,000 or $4,000 a month trying to model the plant so that we could do the budgets. And then one of my guys convinced me to buy DBase 2, and then we bought a couple of personal computers. Just we had to really stretch to buy these personal computers, but with those two personal computers, we were able to stop the timeshare service, so they paid for themselves in 2 months. And then we did the whole plant budget on DBase 2, and then to keep corporate happy, we printed out from the database onto the papers that they wanted and sent it up on paper to corporate, which was pretty wild. Email was just getting started then, so we had an email facility where I could communicate with my boss in California and send some files, and sending a file was a royal pain, but we did it then. And anymore, people are sending 5, 10, 20 megabytes over email and think nothing of it. And we struggled to send a very small 20K file.
Nice. And what do you do today?
Today, I do 3 main thrusts. One, I'm a market trader. I trade options and stocks and futures and forex. I also invest in non-performing mortgage notes and performing mortgage notes, work them through, and then I'm able to sell them. And I'm also I do wood turning. So I actually now am creating a wood turning video every week and putting it up on YouTube. So that's my creative side coming out.
Fun. Well, thank you, Alan. I think I have what I need.
Okay. Hey, have a good one.
You too.
Thanks, Kevin.
If you enjoy these interviews and would like to contribute something, I encourage you instead to donate to one of our favorite organizations, the Internet Archive, at archive.org. The Internet Archive is a nonprofit digital library with the stated mission of universal access to all knowledge. They've done incredible things to preserve computer history, including hosting thousands of programs in an in-browser Atari emulator, creating the Wayback Machine, and offering full-page scans of countless Atari computer books and magazines. Make your tax-deductible contribution at archive.org/donate.